This girl said that either a demon or a mimic was basically terrorizing her family in Appalachia. This story is crazy, and if you get scared easily, I would just scroll right on past. So in 2018, Tangina's grandmother was up in her room sleeping. Her aunt and her grandmother slept in the same room because her grandmother needed help throughout the night. Now, her aunt was downstairs in the kitchen getting ready to come up for bed. As her aunt is getting ready to come up the stairs to go to bed, she hears this big bang, and it's coming from her grandmother's room. So her aunt runs up the stairs because she's worried about her grandmother, and as soon as she gets into the room, she sees that her grandmother, or her mother, is holding her head, and she's like, what's going on, what's wrong? And she told her that something had slammed her head against the wall. This terrified her grandmother so much that ever since this happened, her grandmother refused to be anywhere alone. Anywhere. Poor woman. I feel so bad. As her grandmother's health unfortunately starts to decline, her grandmother decides that she doesn't want to sleep in that room anymore. She doesn't want to be in that room ever again. So she wants to move her room downstairs, or her bed downstairs. Tangina said that to this day, her grandmother, if she is ever left alone, will absolutely panic. So fast forward to 2020 during the first couple weeks of the pandemic. Tangina's younger brother and sister were staying at her aunt's house because her parents were out of the country. So it's important to note that at this time, Tangina's older cousins, there's 3 of them, all worked, and her younger cousin didn't have school because of the pandemic. She also said that her aunt and her grandmother were also home a lot. Now, one day they're all hanging out, and it's pretty boring because it's in the middle of the pandemic, and so her aunt decides to take her younger cousin and her little brother out for a walk to kind of get their mind off things and just take them out for something to do. Her little sister actually didn't know that they had went outside for a walk, so she went upstairs to go look for them. As she walks up the stairs, she's walking past her older cousin's room, and she notices that he's sitting in his room, but he's sitting in the dark on his bed with just the TV light shining on him, just sitting there. Couldn't really see his face clearly, but she's kind of standing there looking at him when he goes, come here. Her little sister is kind of like, no, what do you want? And he goes, come inside my room. She at this point has this bad feeling for some reason, and she does not want to go into that room. So she walks down the stairs and she opens the front door. As soon as she opens the front door, she walks out. She sees her younger brother, her younger cousin, her aunt, and the same cousin that was just sitting upstairs. At this point, she is freaking out. So she runs over to her cousin and she's like, I just saw you upstairs. What are you doing down here? I just saw you. And he was like, you did not see me. I've been at work all day. This obviously freaks everybody out, right? But now we're fast forwarding to a couple years later. So during this time, her older cousin is going through a rough patch. He's drinking a lot. And he likes to go out into the woods to do these things. But one night, her oldest cousin, so his older brother, was upstairs sleeping in his room with his wife. Now, while they're sleeping, around 3 o'clock in the morning, his wife wakes up. She sees somebody walking around their bed. She said that she could barely see it because it was like pitch black in the room though, but she saw someone walking around her bed. And she's thinking to herself, they always lock the door. So she's thinking, that I know that door was locked. Who is in here? Oh, whatever this is gets to the point where it's standing in front of the Wi-Fi router, and so there's light shining on it, and she sees that it's her husband's younger brother, the same one that was having a rough time, that was struggling. Now, he had long hair at the time, and she noticed that it was like in front of his face. So she thinks this is weird, as would anyone. Then she watches him as he starts shaking his head like this and walking from the door to the foot of the bed to back. Just door, foot of the bed, back. She gets so scared at this point that she starts trying to wake up her husband, and he's not waking up at all. So she starts digging her nails into him, kind of like secretively. He's still not waking up. She is frozen in fear watching this, when finally, he wakes up. She then looks over at him and she goes, your younger brother's in our room. He looks over and there's no one in the room anymore. And she's like, I swear he was just in the room. And he's like, we have to talk about this tomorrow. I'm too tired. Next morning, they get up and they walk downstairs, and he goes up to his little brother and he's like, listen, were you in our room last night? And he goes, no, I wasn't even home. He was out in the woods. Tangina also mentioned that in their culture, they don't get intoxicated, or they're not supposed to, because they believe that they are more susceptible to evil if they do. So he was the only one that would ever get intoxicated. Things just get worse. Fast forward to about a year ago at this point. Her cousin's wife is doing laundry downstairs in the basement. It's important to note that there are 2 big fridges in the basement. Top of the fridge is their laundry product. So her cousin's wife is doing laundry and she reaches for the detergent pods on top of the fridge. But as soon as she reaches for it, the box just slides back. At this point, she's like, okay, my mind is playing tricks on me. So she reaches up for it again and slides back again. At this point, she's getting annoyed. So she jumps up, goes to reach for it, and the box just slides all the way back aggressively, hits the wall, falls behind the fridge. At this point, she's like, nope, and she runs upstairs. This next part, I think, is the scariest part of the story. So her cousin works really late at night, her oldest cousin, and he's coming back from work at this point, and he is absolutely starving. So he wants to go downstairs in the basement to get something out of the fridge. He's a tall guy, so when he has to look into the fridge, he has to hunch over pretty far. And at this point, he's hunched over looking into the fridge, and he feels this weird feeling, like something is behind him, watching him. So he slowly turns his head, and what he saw absolutely horrified him. Standing right in front of him is a girl with a white dress on, long black hair. Her mouth is literally unhinged. It's open so wide, and her eyes are just rolled into the back of her head. She's doing the same head shaking motion from side to side as her wife saw her brother doing. This reminds me of one of my scary stories. She said that he ran up those stairs so fast, and it was a long time before he ever went back in that basement. After this, somebody sends them some sort of message. Her oldest cousin is cooking in the kitchen and hears this rattling coming from inside of the fridge. They have this magnetic scissor holder on the fridge, but he just kind of ignored it and continued cooking. But as he's cooking, he couldn't help but look at the fridge again. And as he did, he saw the scissors lift up out of their holder and just fall to the ground. Tangina said that she doesn't know how that happened or if that was some sort of message, but she wants to know if anyone has any thoughts on any of this. Oh God, what did you guys think about that story?
When I ever hear about the Scottown monster? Yes, there was a literal monster terrorizing Jamaica for years and nobody not seem to remember about it. So in 2008, the residents of Scottown, Manchester, them did face an issue. And the issue was, them crops them did get damaged. So them melon, them pumpkin, other plants, other fruits. But there was one specific thing that multiple residents them did complain about, and it was them banana tree. So in the night, the residents them we complain, so them might hear like rustling, which part them plant them when them have them ground where them plant them thing them. They might hear rustling and they might hear them dog. The dog them go on mad at night time. So like sometimes they might look through the window, they might try to look, they must see something but them don't know what they must see. So in the morning when them go out there, the banana tree them flatter ground, the leaf not touch, the fruit not touch, but the bark rip up like something and eat the bark of the banana tree. So the community members them then come together and them talk about it, them share them experience, and they must say, yo, we have to do something about this because our livelihood this it come mash up with thing them and name out the banana tree them. So some of the residents say, alright, them are go do a like a community watch. So night time they meet out there with torch and machete and them a lay wait for see the thing. Some of them get a glimpse from them window, and some of them see it while them outside. Them describe it as a large dog, like it looks like a dog but it's way bigger than a dog, and the limbs them long and slender, animal like but abnormal. So after the creature leave Manchester, we don't hear about the creature until 2014 in Cambridge, Portland. So in Cambridge, Portland, a farmer start complaining about her crops them. She said her crops them a get damaged, but her banana tree them a get eat out, just like the incident back in 2008. Them a get eat out and she don't know what happened to it. She reported to local authorities. After the monster leave Cambridge, Portland, we don't hear about it until March 2024 in Lawrence Tavern, St. Andrew. So in this time now, the residents them start complaining about the same issue. Them crops are get destroyed and the banana tree them are get nyam out. But when the residents them go around the banana tree, they must smell a scent. It smell them no know the scent is very strong, but it's very unusual. Them can't describe what it smells like, but it's a strong, unusual scent. Months passed and there was no documentation of this creature. In December 2024, the creature make an appearance again. And this time it was in Mount Ogle St. Andrew, and I think it's the same area as Lawrence Tavern. So it stayed there for a while, and this time the visit was a bit different. Remember me saying in the first part, say like when the creature come at night time, the dog them are going mad, the dog them are bark. So the creature visiting at night, and same occurrence, plant them and crops them mash up, but banana tree bark the nyam out. But when them go to fill up on the destruction where the creature do, them find two badly injured dog. So he like the dog them attack the something, and the city never like it, so he attack them back and almost kill the two dog them. After this incident in December 2024, there's no documentation of this monster. We don't know if it's still alive. We don't know if it go appear again, and we don't know what it is. But can you imagine, there's a literal monster that was terrorizing Jamaica for years, and we don't even know if it's still out there.
Gather round, because I have another spooky story. The story was submitted by someone who believes that the man her mother has been dating is not just controlling and emotionally draining. She believes that he might actually be something much more dangerous and a lot less human. Let's get right into the story. My mom has been with her boyfriend for over a decade now. When she first introduced us, I remember thinking how charming he was. The kind of person who made a point to remember small details about everyone he met and use them to make you feel seen. When they first started dating, my mom seemed happier than I'd seen her in years. It felt like she had found someone who brought her back to life. But that version of him didn't last. Over the years, the charm thinned out. He became quieter, more withdrawn, and less interested in anyone outside of my mom. Family dinners became rare, and holidays were suddenly inconvenient. When he did show up, he watched conversations more than he participated in them. His attention was always drifting back to my mother, as if he needed to keep her within reach. But what really bothered me was how much my mom changed. She became distant and oddly subdued, like her emotions had been dulled. She stopped laughing the way she used to and seemed tired all the time. Not just physically, but in a deeper, heavier way. Within just a few years, she looked dramatically older. Her face weathered and her posture slumped, as if the life had slowly been drained out of her. People who hadn't seen her in a while would comment on how different she looked, asking if she was sick or just under a lot of stress. She always insisted that she was fine. Her boyfriend, on the other hand, never changed. No new lines appeared on his face. His hair never thinned or grayed. Even his posture stayed the same, upright and alert, in a way that felt unnatural for someone who was supposed to be aging alongside her. Family meals were another thing. He always insisted on cooking when we visited, making elaborate dishes that smelled incredible, but he never actually ate with us. He would sit at the table, push food around his plate, take sips of wine, and eventually excuse himself without finishing. Sometimes the plates would be cleared later, his food still untouched. If anyone commented on it, he'd smile and say he had a sensitive stomach, or that he'd already eaten earlier. The explanation changed often enough that I just stopped keeping track. The moment that shattered any remaining sense of normalcy came when I found old photos. I was helping my mom clean out a closet one afternoon when I opened a box of albums that she hadn't looked at in years. Mixed in with pictures from my childhood were older photos that I didn't recognize. Black and white and faded color prints from decades earlier. In several of them, her boyfriend was there, and he looked exactly the same. The photos were dated over 40 years ago, and across different pictures, he appeared beside two women that I didn't recognize, each identified in handwriting on the back as his wife at the time. I later learned that both women had passed away years earlier from undisclosed illnesses. My mom said she knew that he had been previously married, and she confirmed that the names of those women were the names of his previous wives. After that, I began to inspect his behavior more thoroughly. He never went out during the day unless he absolutely had to, and when he did, he complained about the light as if it physically bothered him. The curtains in the house were always drawn, even on cloudy days, and he insisted on low lighting indoors. It felt as though his body was calibrated for nighttime. I caught myself thinking of the word vampire one evening, and immediately felt ridiculous for even considering it. I didn't believe in things like that, but still, once the idea surfaced, it was hard to push it back down. He never aged and he never ate. He seemed to thrive while my mother visibly deteriorated. And most unsettling of all, the people he had loved before her were all gone, while he remained exactly the same. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore how neatly the pieces fit together once I allowed myself to look at them that way. The fact that I could even think this way made it clear that, vampire or not, he was not good for my mom. That was when we started trying to get her away from him. My siblings and I suggested trips, dinners, and even staying with us for a while. She declined every time, refusing to go anywhere without him. When we insisted, her responses became strange, repetitive, and detached, as if she were reciting something rather than speaking from her own thoughts. She insisted he loved her and that she was fine. Her voice sounded flat when she said it, lacking the warmth that it used to carry. I was visiting one afternoon when her boyfriend was in the kitchen preparing food. I heard him curse sharply, and I turned to see blood dripping from his hand onto the counter. The cut was deep enough that it should have required stitches. I panicked and insisted that he go to the hospital, grabbing paper towels and trying to apply pressure to the wound. He pulled his hand away calmly and told me he was fine. 2 days later, when I saw him again, his hand wasn't bandaged. There was no cut, no mark of any kind. I commented on it without thinking, and the look he gave me was the first time I felt genuine suspicion that something about him really wasn't right. His expression turned alert, as if I had noticed something that I wasn't supposed to. He claimed that he had never actually been cut, and that the knife slipping only made him think that he was injured. But that was a lie. I saw the blood dripping from his hand and cleaned it up myself. After that, he became more controlling of my mom's time and more distant towards me. Visits stopped entirely, unless he was present, and eventually, even phone calls became rare. Now, when I do see my mother, she feels far away, like she's only partially there. She speaks slowly, avoids eye contact, and just generally looks exhausted. Standing next to him, she resembles a woman 20 years older than she should be, while he remains unchanged. We've tried everything we can think of to get her out of that house, but she refuses to leave him. And I think it's because she physically can't. Okay, so what do you think is really happening? Is this just a simple case of emotional manipulation and gradual isolation that maybe just feels supernatural? Or is the submitter's instinct right? That her mom is essentially trapped in a relationship with something that is feeding off of her? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments, and don't forget to follow for the next spooky story.
Let's talk about something scary. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about pretty scary stuff, and I actually made an email where anyone finds this page to send me their ghost stories. And let me tell you, some of these are so effing scary. And a lot of them just make me think about what I would do in that situation, and this is one of them. So let's get into it. The story comes from somebody who did not specify whether or not they wanted to remain anonymous, so for obvious reasons, I'm going to keep them anonymous. So the person who sent me this email says that she never noticed any of the activity that went on in her home to begin with because everybody was always at home anyways, so there was never an opportunity for her to be alone up until this point. She likes to include that she was a little bit of a shit starter when she was a little kid. I'm talking like 11, 12, 13 years old. However, because of this, like I said before, she had never been home by herself up until this point. And in this particular instance, she was suspended from school, which is why she was at home by herself. But her mom had left her a list of chores that she needed to get done before everyone came home that day, which included doing laundry in the basement of the home. Now, it's important to note that the person who sent me this email already didn't like the basement. There was just something weird about it. I don't know. It just freaked her out. Now, it's important to note that in this home, there's absolutely no way that anybody else could have been in this house. It is literally the middle of the day. So unless somebody broke a window and climbed through it, there is no way that anybody was in this home. Which is how the person who sent me this email got freaked out. The person who sent me this email while in the basement begins to hear things. And I don't mean in like a psych yourself out kind of situation. I mean she is listening to music, and over the music she can hear something happening. She pauses the music and can hear these loud boots dragging across the floor. Somebody is walking around with these boots on. So immediately the person who sent me this freezes and is like, who the hell is home? It's the middle of the day. My parents are at work. Nobody's supposed to be in the house. What if somebody broke in? Stays there frozen in fear before getting enough courage to walk around her house looking for the entry point of this person after she didn't hear anything after the first couple minutes. Here's the kicker. She could not find anything out of the ordinary. All the windows were latched. There was no missing screens. Everything was fine. Like every door, every window was locked to perfection, and she could not understand why she heard these boots. Now, an additional detail that was included in this story time is the fact that before and after the situation, she had been seeing shadowy figures all over her house for the entire day. And I'm talking like, see out of the corner of your eye, you look and there's nothing there. So she had been experiencing paranormal activity from the start to finish of this entire day, all by herself. And she concludes this email by saying that she has no idea what the hell it was. It still freaks her out to this day. And she doesn't understand how or why she was hearing these footsteps. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for my ghost stories.
I did witchcraft on my baby daddy. So this girl says that she's from San Luis Potosí, and 8 years ago she was having problems with her baby daddy. She explains that in her desperation, she met somebody who told her that they would help her get him back. Love and witchcraft, I just don't think those mix. Like, you should never force somebody to be with you. Okay, but also the fact that you gave this person kids, you sacrificed your body, and he doesn't want you back. Fuck him. Fuck him. Oh, right. You want to hear the story? Yeah. She says that she's a dumbass and she had no idea what she was getting herself into, but she agreed to do anything that this witch told her to do. She remembers that she got 3 black candles with something else that the witch had given her, and when she tried to light them up, they wouldn't light up. By the way, the witch had already told her, if the candles do not turn on, just cuss them out. It's because there's a block. Somebody's protecting him. So cuss the candles out and then turn them on. That's exactly what she did, and that worked. To be very specific, the witch told her, si no prenden las velas, aviéntale la madre. Why is everything so much better in Spanish? What the fuck? She explains that the second that the candles lit up, she saw this like really small black snake come out of nowhere. She obviously got really scared when she saw the snake, so she ends up running inside of her house to get away from that. And that is exactly when a lot of ugly things started happening. She says that he did return, but you could tell that it was almost like an obligation. Like, you could tell he didn't want to be there, but he was there. This is the creepy part for me. Her daughter, who was 5 years old at the time, got up around 3 in the morning to go to the restroom. The only restroom that they had was at the end of a hallway where there was a back door, which led to exactly where she did the witchcraft with the candles and the snake. Her daughter ends up running into her bedroom at 3 in the morning, saying that at the door, because it was a glass door, there was a girl there who was telling her to open the door for her, but that the little girl, looked like a girl but had no face. Not only was this little girl without a face, but apparently worms and black snakes were coming out from where her eye and mouth should be. She said that she lasted 15 days this way, like dealing with random ugly and nasty things, until she went back to that witch who had originally helped her to help her get rid of whatever was going on. When she did come to cleanse the house, she had given the little girl a rosary, and that rosary immediately went missing. When they tell the witch that the rosary went missing, the witch says that that was a sign that the bad has disappeared and gone away. And with that, so did her baby daddy. Yeah, he was gone. Obviously, he was there against his will, so when that was, taken away, he immediately left her. Wait, the witch did say that the bad had disappeared. What if your baby daddy was the bad girl? Like, let him go. Let him leave. Can you imagine doing witchcraft and then accidentally doing shit that your daughter also sees? Fuck that. I would never mess with that stuff. But what do you guys think?
Say that misery loves company, and I have to agree. Like, why would you want to do something harmful to someone that you don't know just because they're doing better than you? In this story, that's where this happens, and I feel like this happens to a lot of people, but maybe not in this way, or maybe I'm wrong. See reasons I'll be changing people's names, and thank you for sharing your story. Most people, Erica enjoyed her job. She truly enjoyed her job. She knew everyone. She knew how to manage everything. She knew the rules. She followed them. She executed everything like she was supposed to. No problems at all. And that's why they thought that she was a great candidate to be a manager. Everyone was so excited about her promotion, they threw a potluck. And why not? It's Erica. Why not? She's an amazing person. So everyone brought something from their home for the potluck. And Erica was made a special cake from a special someone she thought was a good friend. The potluck was over, everyone grabbed a plate and took something home. Now, Erica decided that she was going to eat her cake when she got home, so she took her cake and she said thank you to her friend who made the cake for her, and she took the cake home right after work. She left it in the fridge and completely had forgotten about it. That was until her partner decided to eat the cake instead. Didn't eat all of the cake. He had left her a slither of the cake because he kind of felt bad for eating the cake because the cake was so good. And he kind of expressed to Erica, listen, I ate some of your cake. I am so sorry, but that cake was so good. You might as well eat the rest of it because if not, I will. Being upset, just told him, just eat the rest of the cake. You just left me a little bit. It doesn't even matter. So without hesitation, he went into the fridge and finished off the cake. Now, this is where things get a little weird. Said that shortly after he started having night sweats, night terrors. He would hear voices, and all of a sudden he started getting dragged out of bed, and there was nobody at the edge of the bed, and she would see him get dragged, like literally dragged, as if this was an Exorcist movie, and she could not understand what was going on. On top of that, he had scratches on his back, and she couldn't explain is that her boyfriend slowly became depressed. Like, he didn't know what else to do. They prayed, they fasted, but nothing stopped the night terrors. Nothing stopped the voices. He would start hallucinating her in the house while she was at work. They didn't know what else to do, where else to turn. And then one day she told one of her coworkers what was going on. When her coworker suggested for them both to get cleansings and her house to be prayed over, because whatever it was invited in the house. Referred her to a practitioner to see if they could help her. And when she got to the practitioner a couple of days later, the practitioner saw it right on her boyfriend. He says there's something evil on your boyfriend and you need to get a cleansing right now, because if not, it's going to kill him. The practitioner stated to Erica, if you guys didn't bring anything into the home, no objects, no items, no nothing, then he must have been fed something. And that's when it clicked for Erica. Her coworker had made her a cake. And that is what caused all of this to start. And she could not ignore it. And the practitioner said to her, who was the person who gave you the cake? And when Erica said the name, chills went down the spine of the practitioner. And that's when the practitioner said, that is the person who did it. Now it's time to reverse this and send it right back to the sender. They said after doing the return to sender to her coworker, that her coworker was complaining to other people that she wasn't sleeping at night, she was having a lot of nightmares, and she didn't understand what was going on. And that's when Erica knew that the practitioner was not lying. So what do you guys think that coworker did? What do you think that was haunting Erica's boyfriend? And why would you do that to somebody?
Oh my gosh, guys, wait until you hear this story from one of my followers, Martina. It is freaking terrifying. So she tells the story from when she was a night shift CNA in a small nursing home in northern Alabama. Martina does say that she is a believer in the paranormal, as she has seen quite a few things during her childhood, seeing figures in her doorway or ghostly figures walking up the fence line near her bedroom window. And she says she's never really been afraid of them until that night while she was working the night shift. So a few weeks prior, they got a new patient in, and she says, we're gonna call this guy Mr. Tom. She said he was really nice and lively, very funny, and he'd always be yelling up the hallways, hello, all night. He was just a really fun guy, and he was always poking fun at all the CNAs, and everybody loved working with him. She said one night she gets to work and she was handed her rotation, and she notices that Mr. Tom is on there. She was delighted by this because they always shared a lot of laughs together. He was such a cool guy, very talkative. Martina says that since there were only 3 CNAs and 1 nurse per night shift, they were each given an entire hall, and each room had 2 patients inside. So Mr. Tom happened to be paired up with somebody who was in for a short stay. They were just recovering from a back surgery, so they would kind of be in and out within the week. So she says around 3 in the morning, they get a call to that room. Somebody needs something. When they get there, they realize that the short stay patient that's in with Mr. Tom was calling them because he was complaining that Mr. Tom would not stop talking and he could not get any sleep. So Martina and her partner are in the room, and while her partner was getting that guy situated, Martina went over to talk to Mr. Tom. So Martina's like, Mr. Tom, you're getting your roommate all worked up. Could you just maybe let him get some sleep? And then Mr. Tom goes off laughing and talking about how he just can't handle the chatty type. And then he asks if Martina could go and grab something out of the bathroom for him. So when Martina comes out of the bathroom, Mr. Tom gets unusually quiet. And then he goes, girl, who is that behind you? So that's a little weird, but she kind of shrugs it off and is like, come on, Mr. Tom, we both know that there's nobody behind me. Describe them for me then. And so Mr. Tom does. He describes him as a man who has overalls on and white wavy hair, and then chills run down Martina's spine because it's sounding just like her papa, who had passed away 6 years prior. She said she just had this internal knowing that it was absolutely her papa because she had never seen him a day without being in overalls. But then it got even worse because Mr. Tom says, and he says, you need to leave. She's definitely feeling this sense of urgency, so she quickly rushes out of the room. So now it's about an hour later and the call light goes off again in Mr. Tom's room. So once again, they go in to check out the situation. Martina says she can't even remember what was needed. Something had to be done. There were a few machines rolled in to check on something. And then as they were rolling the machines out and it was just down to Martina and Mr. Tom again, she noticed that now he is really quiet again. Definitely not himself. So she bends down and she gets level with Mr. Tom and she's like, Mr. Tom, are you okay? Okay, guys. And then he says, I need to be quiet so I don't alarm the man. So she's like, what man? And he's like, the one behind you. And then she goes, the one who looks like my papa? And he goes, no, a different one, a darker one. I don't like that. But she shrugs it off and she says, okay, well, good night, Mr. Tom. And then she turns around and in front of her stands this very tall, black, human-shaped figure that was as tall as the freaking ceiling. She said this thing was so dark and absent of light that she could not even see past it to see the brightly lit hallway behind it. Every hair stood up on her body and she just knew that she had to get out of that room. And guys, oh my God, I have chills everywhere. She ran through it. She also says she quit that night. You know, as one would. But she says it didn't stay at the nursing home. Guys, she says she believes it followed her. And it just keeps getting worse. She says that continuously, sometimes late at night, she feels something cold and dark lie down next to her in bed. Or sometimes it grabs at her ankles and she feels like it's trying to pull her off the bed. Are you freaking kidding me? She says she's come to terms with it, which I don't know how, but she says she feels like she should not have run through it because part of it stuck with her. She also understands why her papa said that she needed to leave. It wasn't in a negative way. He was seemingly trying to protect her. Oh my gosh, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I know that she'll be up in the comments reading too. And if you haven't already, follow for more creepy story time.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of when this girl that I thought was my friend wanted me to go crazy simply because I beat her in one assessment back in high school. Mind you, this girl was smarter than me, so I don't know what her problem was. So y'all, me and this girl were not in the same high school, first of all. And you know, sometimes when you're in high school, you tend to do the same assessments, even though you guys are in different schools. Do you hear what I mean? Yes. So y'all, I was the type of person that never took school seriously. I went to school to have fun. You know, like just see my friends, you know, dala what I have to. And then baby girl was smart. Like my friend was, okay, my ex-friend, she was smart as hell. You know, like whenever we used to study, like I used to go sit with her and we would study because I get better marks because she understands a lot of things, you know. And she used to motivate me here and there. But it never got to a point where we went bar for bar. Like I was always lower, she was always higher, and I didn't care. So this one time they give us an assessment to complete. We are all writing this assessment on Friday. It was a Friday that we were writing this assessment, right? And then I tell her like, yo, like we have this assessment, blah, 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 in this particular subject. She was like, oh, like us too. Like we are writing it on Friday as well or whatever. And it's a closed book assessment. So I was like, no problem, Mobo. The week goes by. She's preparing. I'm not. Because guess what? I was going to study the day before the assessment. The day before the assessment, what you know? So, lucky for us, the teacher gives us a scope. She gives us topics to actually focus on, and she tells us, okay, some teachers were nice in high school, nice enough to give you a scope. Some of them were just like, nah, like you need to go study everything, you know? But our teacher was pretty cool. She gives us the scope. She tells us you need to study this, and that, right? Guys, I take a picture of the scope and I send it to the girl. And I'm like, girl, our teacher gave us the scope for us to study on Eva. So, you know, these are the things that you should focus on. If you want to study the whole topic too, study the whole topic too, but focus mainly on this. She was like, oh, chill, thank you, Wawa. This teacher made things easy for me because the day before, I remember I didn't go to school. I don't know why. And I ate. And I studied like nobody's business. I don't know why, but because I wasn't going to study the entire textbook and it was going to make me lazy, I decided to study those topics and I went in, baby. I went in. Get to the assessment, I flow, right? So my friend is used to me complaining when it comes to like us writing assessments, exams and stuff like that, because she's gonna be like, how was the exam, how was this? And I'd be like, I wrote what I knew. If I fail, I fail. But this time I was kind of confident because I was like, girl, did you see what I told you about? Like, it all came out and all of that. And she was quiet, but I was like, you know what, whatever. The following week, our marks come out again. The marks come out at the same time. When I get home, Pela, she texts me on some, girl, how much did you get, Tobo? And I was like, our teachers didn't really give us like the exact mark that we got, but in percentage, I got 90%. Who? Me? So she was like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, I got 90%. She's like, you're lying, you like to play. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, it was giving you're stupid. How can you get 90%? So I was like, okay. And then I asked her, like, how much did you get? She's like, oh, I got 85%. I'm like, oh, that's not bad. Like, oh, I got 5% more than you did. I'm thinking we are playing here because we're used to doing things like this, isn't it? Now that it's your turn, you're getting mad. Okay, chilled. The marks come out, and I asked the teacher if I can take a photo of my thing so I can send it to my friend. Guys, and the teacher's like, no, we can take our assignments home so that our parents sign it and they see it. I'm thinking, girl, good, so our parents can see it, sign it, and then we bring it back the following day. No problem. How? So I get to the girl again. I show her, like, look, babe, look at what a girl did. Like, I did that, And she was like a little mad, like she was a little off-putting, right? And she's like, oh, can I please take your assessment home with me so that I can see how many marks. I can see where I lost marks and use it as a memo. I'm like, aren't you guys gonna mark it in class? She's like, no. I'm like, okay, I need my mom to go sign this. So after she signs it, I'll text you. You will come and get it. And then tomorrow morning, before I go to school, you give me back my assessment. She's like, no problem. I showed my mom, we're all happy. It's nice. My mom signs it. And then after that, I give it to the girl because I trusted her. Isn't it so? I give this girl my assessment. She goes with it home. She comes back in the morning. She gives it back to me. It does not smell like paper anymore. You know how paper smells? Paper smells like wood sometimes. But like it smells like something, if you've been to a ZCC church, you know that those they tend to burn stuff, and when they burn, they tend to burn like that newspaper, and then they take the smoke and then they do it on the books, and then you can smell that smoke. It was something like that, but I'm just making an example with the ZCC people, not that no. So I smell this paper and I'm like, I suppose this smells like, you were burning something on my paper, but I mize. Fede, I put my paper in my... Fede, I put my paper in my bag and then I go to school. No problem. So when we get to school, we give our teachers the papers back or whatever, and our parents signed. And my teacher can smell. She looks at me like, what is this? What's smelling over here? And I'm like, girl, I don't know. I tell my teacher that I actually gave my friend this paper and it came back smelling like this. I don't know what's going on. And my teacher just looked at me like, hey, you are playing. And I was like, well, and I gave her the paper and she was like, you need to be careful. Stop giving your friends things. You understand? I'm like, I chilled. So, okay, the day goes by, it's chilled. The following day, guys, I don't remember what day it was, and all of a sudden I have this strong urge to quit school. I look at the board and I'm just annoyed. Like, everything irritates me. When the teacher speaks, I'm bored. Like, what are you, like, just leave me alone, type vibes. I'm not understanding why I feel like this, right? People are writing in class, I'm not doing anything. I'm talking to my friends, like I said, I went to school to have fun, but I used to do my work, like I didn't want to overstep boundaries so that they call my parents. No. So I'm all of a sudden, I don't want to do my work. I don't want to write. I don't want to this. I don't want to that. Time for me to go home, guys. I went home and I woke up the next day. It was time for me to go to school again and I refused. I said, I'm quitting school. My mom is asking me, what do you mean? I said, I'm quitting school. I'm not going to school anymore. My mom was like, never. You're going to put that uniform and you're going to go to school. I said, no. Hi, guys. She thinks I'm playing. The first day she goes to work because she was already late and she wasn't expecting me to say stuff like that. And I didn't go to school, guys. So also, guys, I had friends in the neighborhood that did not really finish school, but they were kind of like 3 or 4 years older than me, you know, so they were always chilling. So I started chilling with them, you know, probably from 10 a.m. till I think 6 p.m. I went back home at 6. My mom was like, did you go to school? I said, no, I'm not going to school. Didn't I tell you I'm not going to school? I told you I'm quitting school. So my mom was like, hey, but what is your problem? I'm like, I'm telling you, I don't want to go to school. That's it. The following day, guys, my mom decided to force me to go to school, and I told her, hey girl, I'm not going to school. So she made me put on uniform or whatever. She made me put on uniform. She made me bath. She gave me my lunchbox. She gave me money for school, and I went inside that transport. When I tell you guys, our transport driver left us at school. I took a taxi, came back home, started chilling with the exact same girls. My mistake this time was I didn't change my uniform, right? So I bunked school and I didn't change my uniform. And when I got home, my mom was like, hey, wait, now, what's your problem, guys? My mom, instead of my mom beating me up, my mom was like, you know what, nah? Before I kill you, right in this moment, I'm gonna take you somewhere and we're gonna find out if this is somebody that's trying me or you are doing this on your own. Chill. We get to this person, y'all. And obviously this person asked me, like, who did I give my papers to? You know, I'm like, what papers are you talking about? And the guy is like, well, it was a lady, sorry. The lady told my mom that this one gave her friend her assessment, whatever. She said she's not sure if it was an assessment or an exam, but it's something that is contributing to my year mark. And I gave it to my friend, and my friend went to Dallas stuff for this so that I go crazy because this particular friend does not want me to do better than her. And my mom was like, what friend was that? The lady was like, I can't tell you. She'll tell you who the friend was. And I was like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, she wants you to go crazy because she can see that you have potential, you know? These are the type of people that love to chill with people that are not better than them, because when you're better than them, you pose as a threat. Yeah. Anyways, we went back home and my mom asked me who this friend was. I told her, and she was like, I should never again do what I did because people are not good people. And as for the girl Shay, me and her continued being friends, but I never really told her anything about my school life, about my life anymore. And you know, the friendship eventually ends. And there was this girl who used to be her friend in my school. That girl is also smart, right? She used to be her friend. And I went to her and asked her why did they stop being friends. And she was like, a baby girl is weird. Like, once you start beating her in school, she will stop talking to you. She says she used to beat her in exams, and then she would stop talking to her for an entire week for no reason at all. And she had to stop being friends with her. And they used to go to the same school, and she changed schools because, you know, baby girl was crazy and baby girl tried to do witchcraft on her. And I was like, girl, same.
Scary story time while I make blue ocean slime. Okay, haunted house edition. Yeah, I made 3 slimes out of this one slime tube. Y'all, get your money's worth in. What? Let it drain. Yep. I'ma wait. Okay, y'all, so when I stayed in New York, I'm very convinced that house was a freaking portal to the upside down or something. Okay, let me stop. But yeah, no, like, y'all, I seen so many ghosts or whatever I seen up in that house. It's just crazy, uncanny. I'm gonna put some fragrance, and I didn't want to put so much blue because I want the blue to almost like be like a light blue, you know. The very first time I seen a ghost, I was sitting on this freaking, where I used to film my old slime videos. I was sitting in that area doing my freaking hair, and then next thing you freaking know, I see a face at the top of the stairs. And I was like, and I look, y'all, and I could still see like a face, but it was like fading away. And I got so scared, I literally stopped doing my hair, I cleaned up everything, and then I went to sleep. That's how bad it scared me. I'm gonna put the rest of the fruit in this slime. Maybe not the rest, just that's enough. Yeah, y'all told me, wait, I want to say something. Thank you to the people who told me that Elmer's Glue switched up their little formula and I could only activate it to other Elmer's Glue products, because they real ghetto for that. Anyways, so the next thing that I had seen, I was what, 17, maybe going on 18. I remember I literally was sitting down on the couch. I watched my auntie go from one room to the freaking next, right? And so I was like, oh, let me go talk to my auntie. And she was like, I watched her go to the kitchen, right? I go into the kitchen, right? I even hear movement in the kitchen. I go into the freaking kitchen, nobody's in there. And so I go into the room where my auntie is at, and I was like, yo, like, were you just in the kitchen? And she said, girl, I've been laying down this whole time. What are you talking about? I need to go. And that was a common occurrence where you would see someone that looked exactly like you or someone that you know walk into one room and then no one would be in there. That was like a really common experience. This slime is going to be so pretty when it's like clear. It's going to be so pretty. So we were convinced, me, my family members, we were convinced that my auntie's room was the portal where they were coming out of and stuff like that, because the house was built in 1902, I believe. So the house was pretty old. The house was old, all right? So I remember one day, nobody was in my auntie's room, and I literally was there babysitting, and next thing you know, I seen like somebody in white just standing in the doorway. And I froze, it froze, I looked back, and then I act like I didn't see it, and when I turned back, it was gone. Yeah, go about your way. I'm getting goosebumps because, like, literally, sometimes you would get that feeling if the ghosts were scary or if they weren't, but for the most part, like, you were getting, like, a feeling like somebody's freaking watching me. And then I remember one time, I was in the house by myself, babysitting, and next thing you know, I seen a little black creature, like, sitting next to me. Little black creature. I didn't get a bad feeling about it, though, so I was just like, hey, dude, how you doing? And then it just went away. Like, it was like a quick, I seen it, and then when I looked back, it was gone. Didn't get a bad feeling, though. Remainder of this video, oh my freaking gosh. The remainder of this video has to be filmed with no light because my iPad died. I will never forget that black creature, not the one that I was sitting on the couch next to, but the one that appeared underneath me. I tell this story every single time I talk about this, my scary story times, because y'all, I never felt a feeling like that when I seen like something that wasn't in this world anymore. Never. And like that was so scary. But the most common occurrence ever in the house was like seeing somebody be somebody that you knew, or seeing the lady in white. Like I would constantly see her and I just call her the lady in white, and I'm getting like the most weird vibe talking about it right now, but it's just because I'm scared and I don't like the fact that ghosts are real. So that's the end. That's the end. Bye guys.
Spooky story time. I was a patrol officer. This call still haunts me. It was around 2:15 a.m. on a slow Thursday night. My partner and I were driving a quiet suburban street when dispatch sent us to a residence. A man had called, saying he heard someone moving in his backyard. He wasn't sure if it was an intruder or an animal. Nothing unusual, except for the panic in his voice. We arrived 5 minutes later. The house looked normal. Front door locked. No movement outside. The man came out to meet us. He said he'd been watching through a window and saw shadows moving in his backyard. He thought it might be someone hiding in the bushes. We split up. My partner walked around the left side. I went to the right. The backyard was quiet at first. Too quiet. Then I heard it. A soft click, like the sound of a latch or a door creaking somewhere behind me. I called out, "Police, show yourself." Nothing. I moved toward the sound, flashlight cutting through. The darkness. That's when I noticed the basement window. It was slightly cracked open. I radioed my partner. He whispered that he was seeing the same thing. We approached cautiously. I peered through the window. The basement was empty, or so it looked. Then I saw it. A shadow moving behind a stack of boxes. Slow, deliberate. I kicked the window, yelling. No response. We broke the lock and entered. Flashlight sweeping every corner. Boxes, shelves, storage containers. Nothing. I swear for a moment, I felt eyes on me. A presence, something waiting. We cleared the basement. No intruder, no footprints, no evidence anybody had been there. We started searching the rest of the house. Nothing unusual. Every door locked, every window intact. We stepped outside. The man who had called us was standing on his porch, pale. He told us something we couldn't explain. I saw him, he said. He was in the basement. But I didn't call the police from inside. Dispatch confirmed later that there had been a second call coming from inside the house, right as we arrived. We still have no explanation. Nothing was stolen, nothing was damaged, but my partner refuses to go on calls there at night. And every time I drive past that street, I check the basement windows, just in case.
Craft gone wrong. This story came from someone named Jocelyn. Jocelyn said that I could use her real name in the story, and she actually supported this with a news article from her town. This story takes a crazy, crazy turn. Maybe one of the craziest endings that I've gotten for Spooky Scary Storytime. Also, trigger warning on this one because there is a little bit of violence. Actually a really violent ending, so consider yourself forewarned. But Jocelyn says in 6th grade, she moved to a new house. She grew up in West Virginia, and when they moved to this new house, she made friends with this group of girls, some of who she's still friends with to this day. Jocelyn and her new friends had an interest in everything paranormal, everything spooky, as preteen girls sometimes do. So Jocelyn makes friends with this one girl named Kaylee who didn't live too far from her, and Kaylee says one day, I have a Ouija board, you guys want to play with it? And Jocelyn had never played with one before, so she's like, yeah, everybody come sleep over at my house, we'll play with it. They were really excited. And that's where everything started to go wrong, because of course it did. If you haven't learned anything from these stories, don't play with Ouija boards. But they're like, whatever, nothing's gonna happen. So they all gather at Jocelyn's house, they bring out the Ouija board. As they were playing with it, the planchette was sliding all over the place. They kept taking their hands off it to see who was moving it, because they were like, there's no way this thing is moving on its own, right? But she swears at one point they all took their fingers off and the planchette flew across the board on its own, which freaked them out so much they ran upstairs to see what her parents were doing. And she said stupidly they didn't say goodbye to whatever this was. Ouija boards are still marketed as a children's game I will never understand, but I digress. From that point forward, they were not going to play with the Ouija board anymore because it scared them too much, but they were still interested in contacting supernatural forces or the paranormal. So they decided that they were going to try scrying, which if you're unfamiliar, scrying is when you gaze into a reflective surface and you try to catch glimpses of the past, the future, other dimensions. Sometimes people use mirrors, sometimes they use crystal balls, sometimes they use the glass surface of water. Jocelyn and her friends started with water, but they couldn't really see anything, so they decided to use a mirror in Jocelyn's bedroom. They didn't see anything in there either, though. Jocelyn's friends leave, and she goes to bed that night thinking nothing of it. She wakes up in the middle of the night, remembers looking at the mirror on the wall facing her bed. In the mirror, standing next to her bed, is a woman wearing a white nightgown. She was a ghost with a short brown bob. The woman's face was expressionless. Jocelyn said, I must have been surrounded by an angel or God or something because I don't remember being scared. So I shifted around in bed a little bit. I looked at the mirror to see if it was maybe just the way that I was laying and something else was catching, but the woman still stood there. And as I looked again, she bowed her head to look at the floor. She's convinced at this point that she's just dreaming, so somehow she falls back asleep. She said she woke up again, though, while it was still dark out, again in the middle of the night, and she happened to look at the mirror again, but this time the woman's standing there, but her head was bent sideways, and she had a shocked and angry expression across her face. Typing that part out still gives her chills, and to this day, she's afraid of mirrors. These are just 2 examples of some paranormal activity she said she experienced while living in that house, and this is her real name, so she said she'll be in the comments if people want to know more about these experiences. But anyway, fast forward, they move out of the house. When they moved, she said for some reason her stepdad would not let her take that mirror out of her bedroom. She doesn't know why, she doesn't remember why, but he was like, just leave it, we'll get you a new one when we move. After they move, all of the paranormal activity in her life seems to cease. She's like, everything's cool, I'm happy. Then she finds out sometime after moving that there had been a homeless woman sleeping on the porch of the house when a man came up to her in the middle of the night and, trigger warning, this is where it gets violent, poured gasoline on her and lit her on fire. Sent me this article. I blocked out, obviously, the trigger word in the title so I don't get censored. But this man in the interview says that he was under the influence of paranormal activity when he did it. Tons and tons of news articles about this. The guy did end up getting charged in 2019. I looked it up, and now he's serving a life sentence. Yeah, she said that she was sharing this as a reminder that witchcraft is not a game. You should leave it to practitioners if you're interested in it, or at least the part about contacting other entities, because you truly never know who you're contacting. You hear this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where I share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that they've ever experienced. If you have a story, we would love to hear it. Remember that video of that woman who was screaming on the plane and she was saying that mother effer isn't real? She was making this big scene and she was escorted off, and then she came out and made a video literally in the same clothes at the airport saying oh, I was intoxicated, or basically she just made a big deal and she apologized for the whole incident, but people didn't really buy it. Well, I got a story kind of related to that, sort of. This woman emailed and said that her grandfather was in the Navy. He had an interaction with a pilot while at the Navy Museum in Pensacola because I always went there as a kid for vacation. Her grandfather was actually one of the guys that painted the anchor outside. She said ever since that lady came out from the plane, she's always thought about this incident. Her grandfather was always really into planes and the Blue Angels, and so in 2007 he took her to an air show there. After the air show, they were letting everyone who wanted to come into the museum and meet the pilots. Her grandma's like, oh, do you want to meet the pilots? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, okay. So they go inside the museum and they're waiting in line to meet this one pilot. Also, I shared another Blue Angels pilot story before, and Blue Angels fans came for me in hordes. And listen, I'm not saying that all Blue Angels pilots are something otherworldly, okay? I'm just sharing this woman's experience. So anyway, she says they're standing in line and they get up to the pilot. There's still a few people in front of them, but she makes eye contact with the pilot that they're standing in line to meet. And as she makes eye contact with him, her entire body goes numb. She said she felt she was looking into these long tunnels, his eyes were there, but he wasn't looking at anything, if that makes sense. She says, I swear on everything, his eyes just weren't right. It was like looking into dead, empty tunnels where I should have been. She said as she locked eyes with him, she could not move, but maybe it was just the way he was standing. Maybe it was just because she was intimidated. Like, she didn't know. But then she feels her grandfather's hand tighten around her arm, and he starts to pull her out of line. She looks up at him. She's like, what's up? He's like, we're not standing here. Like, we're leaving. She says, oh, I wanted to meet the pilot. He goes, not this one. Other lines for other pilots, but they headed home. Later that night, she was supposed to be in bed. She heard her grandparents downstairs talking. She goes and she peeks and she's eavesdropping, as we do when they're children, and she hears her grandpa say to her grandmother. Context, by the way, was that the grandma was asking if they had met the pilots, and the grandpa says, no, I thought they were all gone, but they saw me, and I think she saw them, like speaking of the granddaughter. Grandma just gasped, and she was like, she saw them, and then he quickly hushed her, and he said, we don't want to wake her up. She said at the time she was always too afraid to ask questions. She's 28 now. He's sadly passed on, so she doesn't really know what he was talking about. What's interesting is she said they did go back a couple of times because it was a close family vacation for them, but anytime they went to that museum, her grandpa would keep like an especially close eye on her. He would keep her really close. He would tell her not to look people in the eye. Very weird, unsettling, and unexplained behavior from her grandpa. But yeah, let her know what you think. This isn't at all related to the woman on the plane and those MFers not being real, but interesting enough to share, I think. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where I share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that they think nobody else would believe or that they've never shared before. So if you have a story, we would love to hear it.
Let's read another true and scary story. I came across your TikTok page and knew immediately I wanted to share my experience. I've never voiced out loud what happened, and by the end, I'm sure you will see why. So I lived in upstate New York during college in the Finger Lakes region. I had come to realize that there were animals I was not accustomed to be on the lookout for. Think coyotes, bears, the occasional wandering wolf. But nothing prepared me for what happened, and I never found anything to explain it. I was driving home one morning after a work shift that ended in the early morning, around 4 a.m. It was farm country, so I was driving long roads that were hills surrounded by fields. It was a route I had driven hundreds of times. At one point, I was passing a farm surrounded by massive fields. I was still at the entrance to the fields before the house, driving downhill toward the house and the fields beyond it. As I neared the house, something larger than my car appeared out of nowhere from my left and ran directly in front of me. I slammed on my brakes, and as it passed, its right hind leg stepped over the hood of my car. It never slowed down, just kept running and disappeared to my right. It was no creature I had ever seen before. Some internal feeling told me not to stop and get out of there as fast as I could. I hit the gas, sped the rest of the way home, and was prepared to run the only red light between me and my apartment, but thankfully it was green. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I was getting ready to get out of my car when I was suddenly overwhelmed by the feeling that something was watching me. I called a friend and woke them up, just saying, "Hey, I have an important question that can't wait." Then I got out of my car and ran up to my apartment while casually asking them how work was and whether they were going to be in class the next day. As soon as I got inside, I apologized for waking them and told them to go back to bed. They asked what was going on, and I said I didn't know, I couldn't explain it. To this day, even though I've moved away, I still sometimes, especially at night, get the feeling that something not human is watching me. I've always had this deep gut feeling that I can never say what I saw out loud because something is listening and waiting for me to acknowledge it. To describe the creature as best as I can, imagine the werewolves from Harry Potter, but with long, spindly legs like a spider and an extremely long, thin neck. If you've seen Hazbin Hotel, picture Alistair's neck in his demon form. It had no hair at all, completely bald, and was a grayish-brown color. Its hands looked human, with impossibly long nails, but its feet were pawed, with large claws. And again, it essentially ran over the hood of my car without needing to jump. It had to be at least 10 feet tall. It had a dog-like head with large teeth, sunken eye sockets, and glowing white eyes. Oh, this is so horrifying, and I'm so sorry that this happened to you, and I'm very sad to hear that you are still experiencing a feeling that something is still watching you to this day. I feel like this is a very common theme that, like, someone will see something paranormal or a creature, and then after that feel kind of haunted by it for the foreseeable future. And I hope that as time passes, this feeling begins to fade for you, because I can only imagine how terrifying it is to feel like you're being watched every single day. If you guys have any personal stories you'd like to share, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
Hi Daisy, my name is Kevin, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. This happened in my bedroom when I was 17 years old, and it's something I will never forget. Growing up, I constantly heard stories about a certain house in my neighborhood. People whispered about a dead woman who appeared inside it. A woman with short blonde hair, dressed in a white 1960s style sleeping gown, with no eyes, just empty, dark sockets. The stories terrified me. My tia lived nearby, and neighbors would often tell her how families never stayed long in that house. Something always drove them away. Years later, my family decided to move. We were excited for a fresh start until we realized where we were moving. We had never actually seen the haunted house before, only heard the stories, and somehow, without knowing it, that was the house we chose. The day after we moved in, I told a friend at school about our new place, and he wanted to come over after class. As we walked toward my house, he suddenly stopped. His face went pale. "Wait, that's your new house?" he asked quietly. I answered yes. He froze for a moment before whispering, "You moved into the haunted house." My stomach dropped. I felt sick when he confirmed it was that house, the one with the lady. I didn't even know what to say. Still, my dad refused to move. He always said, "No le tengas miedo a los muertos, tenle miedo a los vivos." Don't fear the dead, fear the living. Living there never felt right. It always felt like someone was watching us. At night, we'd hear footsteps on the stairs, even when everyone was asleep. Chairs would move on their own, lights turned off by themselves, strange noises echoed through the house. But for years, we never actually saw her. Then came the night that changed everything. I was sleeping on my back, staring at the ceiling, when I felt that heavy sensation. Sleep paralysis. I knew I wasn't fully asleep because I could still see my brother across the room. I tried to move, but couldn't. Then I looked at the doorway. She was standing there. She looked exactly like the stories described. Short blonde hair, a long white nightgown, and no eyes. I tried to scream my brother's name, but nothing came out. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I blinked, and she was closer. I blinked again, closer. Every blink brought her nearer, until she was right beside my bed. At that moment, I truly believed I was going to die. Suddenly, she attacked me. She scratched me, hit my face, and clawed at my arms and neck. I felt everything. I tried screaming, begging for help, but my body was frozen. Seeing her up close was the most evil, sinister thing I've ever witnessed. When I finally woke up the next morning, I had a pounding headache. My body ached, and there were scratches on my arms and neck. After I told my family what happened, no one wanted to step foot inside the house, especially the bathroom. That's where you could feel her presence the most. I eventually named her Emily. Over time, I got used to the activity. The noises never stopped. The feeling of someone being in the room with you never went away. My dad still lives there with my younger siblings, and to this day, I hope they never experience what I did with Emily. Because once you see her, you never forget her.
Do spirits sometimes give us warnings? Now, there's a story out of Odessa, Texas. There's this man named Greg. Greg and his family moved into this small family home in Odessa, Texas. And they'd lived there about 2 years. And he said this one night when him and his family were all asleep, the phone started to ring. So he picked up the phone, and it was his neighbor. And his neighbor said, "Hurry, get out of your house right now, like it's on fire. There's flames outside coming out of the roof." So he runs, he grabs his wife, he grabs his kids, and he gets outside. But when they get outside the home, they look at the house. They can't see any signs of a fire. There's no smoke, there's no flames. So he's confused. He walks over to the neighbor's house, and he knocks on his door. The neighbor comes to the door, and he looks like he's just woken up. And he's like, "Hey, man, why did you call me and tell me there's a fire? Like, there's no fire at the house." And the neighbor's like, "What are you talking about? Like, I've been asleep. I did not call you." And he was adamant that he never called him and told him his house was on fire. So Greg goes back home, and he thinks, maybe it's just a prank call. But then this happened like 2 or 3 more times. Then one night, they were all asleep, and in the middle of the night, his son starts screaming. Greg runs into his bedroom. What's wrong? What's wrong? He said, Dad, there was a man in my room, and the man was on fire. And he goes, what do you mean, like a man in your room? And he goes, there was this man in my room, and there was flames surrounding him. So the father, he searches the entire house. He doesn't find anything. He said all these just weird things that kept happening that were pertaining to fire. And then one night, he comes home late from work. He pulls in the driveway. And as he looks through the front window, he can see flames going up the wall. So he instantly runs inside, wakes up his wife, wakes up his kids, and tells them to get out of the house. Except he doesn't find any fire. So by this time, he's really stressed out by all this. And he thinks, my family needs a break. I need a break. I'm going to take him on a small vacation. So they go away for a week. But while he's on vacation, he gets a phone call. It's the fire department. And they say, your house has burnt down.
I need to tell you this ghost story. We saw something in our yard that night. I'm a freshman in college now, but this happened years ago. When I was in the 8th grade, something happened that I still think about late at night. One evening, my mom, my 2 sisters, and I were coming home from the dollar store. We parked in the driveway and started unloading groceries from the trunk. My sisters went inside first, while my mom and I stayed behind to get the rest. It was around 8 or 9 p.m. in late November. For context, our house sits on a hill, deep down some back roads through the woods. Our front yard is a downhill slope with a lot of open space. There are only a few trees scattered around, and on the other side of the driveway there are dense woods, and the driveway itself is very long. As my mom and I carried the last of the groceries toward the porch, we heard leaves crunching. We both stopped and looked into the yard. At first we thought it was a deer. The head was hidden behind a tree, and it was dark outside. But then it took a few steps backwards, moving into the light from our front porch. That's when we realized it wasn't a deer. The thing was completely pale and naked, extremely thin, and standing on all fours. It didn't have a face. Its head looked like a mannequin. Its body, I can only describe it as looking like a Demogorgon from Stranger Things. It turned its head towards us. Then it stood on its hind legs. It ran across the yard, over the driveway, and into the woods. The entire time it stayed upright. It was freakishly tall, so tall that when it crossed the tree line, the tops of the trees shook as it passed. My mom and I ran inside and shut the door. Once inside, we just stared at each other. I asked her, "Did you see that too?" She asked, "What did you see?" I told her, and she said that she had seen the same thing. We locked the doors and went to bed. The next morning, my mom went back outside to the area where it ran across the driveway. That's when she saw the prints. At first, they looked like deer tracks, but there were long, striding marks between them. And as the tracks continued, the hoof-like prints slowly turned into something closer to paws. My mom stopped following them after that. Over the next few days, strange things continued at night. One night, we had the sliding glass door open that leads to the back porch. Our dogs were standing there, growling harshly. My mom and I were trying to figure out what was upsetting them, and that's when we heard it. A loud, distant scream, like a howl and a cry mixed together.
Yeah, this guy's a scary one because he was described as someone who would hunt anything with a heartbeat. Terrifying, horrible, awful person. I've told this story before. He robbed people, assaulted people, tortured people. He taunted the police, and then he also murdered people. Every single state in the US has had at least one serial killer, if not more. Sometimes they're just passing through, and sometimes they're born there and kill there and die there. It just kind of depends on the state. Today I'm going to tell you guys about the most notorious serial killer in Vermont. If you're new here, this is a map of all the states I've covered so far. Today we are talking about Israel Keyes, and this is a very, very long story. And actually, before we get into the story, I do have some exciting news. I am bringing back my podcast and YouTube this year. So I'm going to be telling you guys the story here, and it's still going to be lengthy and long because there's so much to talk about. But I'm going to get even more into the details on my YouTube if you want to go watch it there as well. So getting right into it, Israel Keyes. Israel grew up in a very seriously religious, controlling, strict household in Utah. His family was LDS for a while, and then they went to like this super strict, basically a white supremacist church called the Ark. Just red flags all around. And while going to that church, Israel's family actually becomes friends with a guy named Chevy Kehoe, and if you don't know who that is, he is currently serving 3 life sentences for murdering and torturing a family. He has like a big family too, and the dad's super strict, the mom's super strict, like they want their kids to be religious, but they don't really give their kids a lot of structure. They have a lot of like rules of what they can and can't do, but day to day there's not a lot of structure. The kids literally have to live outside in tents because their cabin's not big enough for all the kids. A lot of times the kids were fending for themselves, trying to find food on their own. Even though they had these really strict, high expectations for their religion, they didn't care about how they were as people. Israel ends up growing up and says he doesn't really believe in what they believe, and he tells them that. And even though he doesn't agree with their faith, he really wants his family's approval. It's like what all the kids have been craving their entire childhoods. It's just any sort of like positive reinforcement from their very strict, not very loving parents. And so he tells his family this, and they kick him out. He was already like a violent kid. He was torturing animals, playing with roadkill, like all these different things. And now he's like, okay, I'm gonna embrace the violence more. And he starts practicing Satanism. He decided he really wanted to kill someone for Satan. So this all really started to begin in 1996 in early March. I will say, again, Israel has been in and out of trouble his whole childhood. He's a menace to the neighbors. He's stealing guns. He's shooting at people's houses with BB guns. He's torturing animals. He's known in the area for being a menace. So it's not shocking that when this happens, when this 12-year-old little girl goes missing, that they would be asking Israel some questions. So in March, a young girl, again, she's only 12 years old. Her name is Julie Marie Harris. She just vanishes. She'd been waiting at a church for a ride, and then she went missing. And Julie actually was a medalist in the Special Olympics. She was a double amputee. It wasn't until over a year later that her remains were found. However, her prosthetic feet and her purse had been found in a river nearby a month after she had gone missing. And all of this is very, very close to where Israel currently lives. So Israel was questioning this. Julie's stepdad was also like named the suspect, and her murder actually still remains unsolved today. Israel was 18 at the time, and it is mostly believed that Israel killed her. So now, a year later, June 1997, Marlene K. Emerson, she's 29, is found dead in the remnants of her burned down home. It was a trailer home, and she lived there with her 12-year-old daughter. However, when they're sifting through the rubble, they don't find her daughter's remains, they just find hers. And they realize the daughter, whose name was Cassandra Emerson, was not with family, she wasn't at school, she should have been in that fire, but she's nowhere to be found. So she's now labeled as a missing person. Her remains ended up being found the following year, 13 miles from her home, very close to where Israel lived as well. And they did question Israel. He said he had been to that trailer and he was a suspect in their deaths, but again, he was never caught. I think it was due to lack of evidence at the time. But last time I told the story, I thought that he was like basically for sure the killer. I will say now in 2024, apparently another man was arrested for their murders. His name was Charles Tatum and he lived in the area. But when I went and looked, there's still a lot of discourse online about he's not the killer, Israel Keyes is. In 1997, he ended up moving to Oregon. He's about 20 years old now, and he ends up assaulting a teenage girl at a river. She's tubing with friends. He sees her and stalks her in the woods. He had plans to murder her right then and there for his ritualistic murder, but he ended up having, I guess, what he would call a moment of weakness where he couldn't bring himself to kill her, and he ends up letting her go. And he said in that moment he realized he would never have a moment of weakness again. In the fall of 1997, he ends up moving to Albany, New York, and almost immediately after he does, a young girl named Susan Lyle disappears from Albany. That doesn't seem like a coincidence to me. She was 19, and on March 2nd, she left her job at a computer store. Then she went to the university campus and disappeared. And that same week, Israel had been seen stalking people in the Marshall's parking lot not far from where she lived and where she went to school. And so it seems very likely that Israel killed her too. And money was withdrawn from her bank, and her ATM pin was used to withdraw that money. And her boyfriend at the time, who's been cleared from this, said that only him and her had her ATM pin. So whoever took her and killed her either forced her to use her ATM pin or forced the information out of her. And so that's another reason why it seems likely that Israel killed her, because we will see throughout this, Israel is very motivated by money. After that, in July of 1998, he enlisted in the army, and he was drunk a lot, violent, depressed. It's estimated that around this time he burglarized as many as 20 to 30 homes. That in of itself is insane. But eventually, in the early 2000s, 2001, he's discharged from the army, and it sounds like when he was deployed in Egypt during his time in the army, some stuff happened, but I will talk more about that in like my longer YouTube version. So he ends up getting out of the army, and he moves to Neah Bay in Washington, and he and his girlfriend at the time live there together, and they end up having a child. At one point though, soon after they moved near Neah Bay, their neighbor goes missing. Again, doesn't seem like a coincidence that he moves somewhere and then someone goes missing right after. But later, their neighbor, his body ends up being discovered. And he had been strangled, but for whatever reason, they couldn't rule his death as a homicide. They ruled it as accidental. Those things don't add up. But at the time, no one thought Israel was involved because even though he has this history of violence, it's not really all on like a record. And so no one in the area really knows that like he's a dangerous guy. And in my YouTube video, I'm going to go over multiple more potential victims of his. So I'm going to go into more depth on some of his potential victims. There are quite a few. I will mention one potential victim that I'm going to put in the YouTube video. Her name was Wendy D. Hoop, and on April 22nd of 2005, she just disappears. She was a mom and a wife. She was a reliable person. She cared about her job, and one day she just didn't show up for work. And one neighbor says they saw her at 7 a.m. So we know she was alive at 7 a.m. that morning, but between her house and work, she somehow disappeared and she's never been seen again. There is some suspicion that maybe her husband killed her, but there's even more suspicion that Israel killed her. And we now know in hindsight that same week she went missing, Israel also bought a boat in Washington, and he later admitted that he killed and dumped at least 2 people on that boat into the ocean, but he never said who those 2 were. Very likely one of them was Wendy D. Hoop. So after this, he ends up moving up to Alaska with his daughter in 2007, and it is here in Alaska that he starts a construction business, and he ends up living here until he gets caught. A little while later, he's traveling for work, and in April of 2009, he is traveling to New Jersey. The same exact time he's visiting in New Jersey, a woman named Deborah Feldman vanishes, and to this day her body has never been found, and it is very, very widely believed that Israel killed her. When he was interviewed years later after he was arrested for other crimes, he said that he had taken a woman, and he alluded to it being Deborah Feldman, but he never actually just came out and admitted it. Police did discover that on his computer, he not only like looked up Deborah Feldman a couple times, he actually Googled her and her missing persons case hundreds of times. Hundreds of times. That is too many times for you to not be involved. On April 10th, so the day after he potentially killed her, he robs a bank in New York and then hid on a campground for another day or 2 trying to hide from the police searching for this bank robber in the area. He ends up laying low, and unfortunately they don't catch him at the time, and he goes back to Alaska. A little while later, he decides he wants to go visit his mom in Indiana, and he gets there on June 22nd. And on June 23rd, a young girl named Lauren Spear vanishes. Again, we're seeing a pattern. He touches down in a state and someone goes missing. And there are many theories as to why she vanished. Some people think she was drinking too much and like fell into the river. Other people think that she could have been killed by another killer named Daniel Massel, and many others think Israel Keys killed her. So the day after he gets to Indiana, a girl goes missing. And then 5 days later on June 8th, he decides he's going to leave his mom's house. He rents a car and he drives to Vermont, over 900 miles away. He ends up driving to Bill and Lorraine Currier's house. They were a married couple in their 50s, and he drives to their house, and then the next day, neither one of them shows up for work, which is unlike both of them. And so they are reported missing. And we find out that he had gone to their house, kidnapped them, and tortured them, and he made them suffer immensely. The police had no idea what happened to them. They didn't know if they just up and left. They didn't know if they were murdered. Like, people are searching for them. They're considered missing people, but no one had Israel on their radar, and their murders just go unsolved for years. Once Israel is arrested for other things, he does admit to killing Bill and Lorraine, and he tells us that he kidnapped them and drove them to an abandoned house in the middle of the woods, and to this day, their bodies have never been recovered, even with his confession. And I honestly was kind of wondering if, like, with the long list of, like, potential victims that I had found that I talk about in the YouTube video, I was starting to wonder if, like, all of these people he could have killed. I was starting to get skeptical. Like, maybe he killed some, but not all. But then I heard this fact, and now I feel like he killed all of them. He had kill kits across the entire country so that he could travel anywhere in the country, and then if he decided he wanted to kill, he could just go dig one up. He didn't have to buy anything. He didn't have to go to the store. He could just stay undetected, dig up his kill kit, murder people, hide it again, and then go about his life. And this is part of the reason he remained undetected for so long. He had at least 12 kill kits hidden all over the United States. And we now know that the kill kit that he used with Bill and Lorraine in Vermont, he had buried in Vermont 2 years before he killed them. So that means for at minimum 2 years, he had planned on going to Vermont and killing someone. We don't know if he had planned on killing Bill and Lorraine or if they were just kind of like victims of the moment, but that's terrifying that for at least 2 years he had a kill kit so that he could come and kill someone in Vermont whenever he wanted. Another thing that happened that we aren't 100% sure is Israel, but like it's we're pretty sure, we just, again, haven't been able to prove it, is the Boca killings in Boca Raton, Florida. It was 3 different crimes committed. What happened absolutely paralyzed the community, and people were robbed, assaulted, and killed by this person. And this sketch looks a whole lot like Israel Keyes in New York robbing a bank. And so it's pretty believed that he is also the Boca Raton killer. We don't know for sure, but that guy's never been caught, and it looks a whole lot like Israel. Just saying. I will be telling the whole story of those killings on YouTube as well. On February 15th of 2012, James Tidwell, who was 58 years old, he was last seen in Texas as he was about to leave his job site at 5 a.m. He has long dark hair and he's wearing like a white hard hat. And at first we didn't think that Israel was connected to his death. He just goes missing. We had no idea. But then the next day, and this is the reason why we think Israel killed him, the next day, Israel goes to rob a bank in Texas. So not only is he in Texas at the same time that this guy goes missing, but he goes in and robs the bank in a white construction hard hat with dark hair on his head. It looks very much like James's hair. And years later, when he's asked about this specifically, Israel says, you don't have to buy real hair to get real hair. Obviously implying that he took James's hair and hard hat to stay unidentified in this robbery. Right before he had flown to Texas, in Alaska is when he committed probably his most notorious crime, the one that he is most known for, and the reason he's called the Alaska serial killer. At the beginning of February, a couple days before he goes to Texas, he ends up going to a coffee shop where Samantha Tesla Cohen was working. And he walks up to it with a ski mask and a gun. He holds her at gunpoint, he gets her debit cards, and then he kidnaps her. He ends up keeping her for a day, torturing and assaulting her, and again, he robs her, and then he ends up killing her. After he kills her, he puts her in the shed, and then he flies out of state. He goes on a cruise, and then after the cruise, he goes to Texas. This is when he kills James, robs a bank, and then flies back to Alaska. So he's back in Alaska, undetected, and he's been gone for over 2 weeks, and her body's just been sitting in the shed. And he decides that robbing the bank was not enough money, and so he takes Samantha out of the shed. And this is pretty graphic, so just be warned. He puts makeup on her, holds up a newspaper from a few days before, and tries to make it look like she's alive so that he can get ransom from her family. The family believes him, and even though they don't know who's sending the ransom note, he leaves instructions on how to send money to them. And they send him ransom money. And I can't imagine what the family's thinking. Their daughter has gone missing. She's been missing for 2 weeks. It seems like there's little to no hope that she's still alive, and then you get this glimmer of hope that she's alive because someone sends a ransom note, you send money, and then you never hear from her again because he already killed her. So they end up wiring him money based on his instructions, and after they do, he ends up dumping her body in the Matanuska Lake. Fortunately, he's an idiot because the police are able to see who withdraws this money. And so when he withdraws the money, they see that it's Israel Keyes, and they end up building a case against him. They end up being able to arrest him in Texas. They extradite him back to Alaska. He is arrested and charged for her murder. Eventually, they look in his past after they have him for her murder, and they realize, like, oh my god, he's a serial killer. He didn't just kill Samantha, he's killed so many other people. And he was sentenced to prison for life. He was never going to get out, but in 2013, he ended up taking his own life. But because he's dead, we just will never know who he killed, how many people he killed, how many different states he killed in, but we do know that he is a horrific, terrible, scary guy. His crimes, like, absolutely haunt many different states, including Alaska and Vermont. He was a very scary, dangerous guy, and I'm glad he can no longer hurt people.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
It's so controversial. It's said that this case divided New Zealand because you either think that they arrested the right person or you don't. Today we're New Year's Eve in 1997 in Marlborough Sounds. Marlborough Sounds is a group of drowned river alleys at the top of New Zealand's South Island. It is an extremely popular area, especially in the summer, especially for people who like to party. 17-year-old Olivia Hope, along with her older sister and a group of friends, had plans to attend a New Year's Eve party at the Furno Lodge, and it was a big party. I mean, like, more than 1,500 people. But the only way to get there was by boat, so they had rented a yacht called the Tamarack and took that to get closer, then took a water taxi to get to where the lodge was actually at. So from the mainland, rode a yacht, rode the water taxi, then arrived at the Furno Lodge. They were planning on celebrating the entire night and into the new year, and then sleeping on the Tamarack before returning it the following day. A lot of people were sleeping on boats that day because odds were they were going to be up late partying, celebrating, and they were probably not going to be well enough to drive the boats back anywhere. So it was a common thing.
At the party, eventually, one of Olivia's good friends, 21-year-old Ben Smart, shows up. They're celebrating through the early hours of the next morning, and then the party eventually starts to slow down as more and more people are heading off to bed. Olivia's sister, along with the group of friends that they were with, eventually head back to the Tamarack to call it a night. Ben and Olivia decide to stay up a little bit later. When they're eventually ready to go to bed, they both head back to the Tamarack, and Olivia isn't happy. She's not happy because she goes to go to bed and she finds that the Tamarack was full of people either already sleeping or getting ready to go to sleep. Her bed had been taken by quote-unquote freeloaders, and there was essentially no room on that boat for them to go to bed. Annoying, but not the end of the world. So her and Ben now need to find somewhere else to stay. So from the Tamarack, they hop in a water taxi with intentions to go back to the mainland to figure out where they were going to go to sleep. The driver was a guy called Guy Wallace. And on the water taxi was obviously Ben and Olivia, another couple, and an unidentified man who is very often referred to as the mystery man in this case. Olivia and Ben, I assume, are talking out loud about the situation, talking about how they have nowhere to sleep, when this mystery man goes, "Oh, I'm headed back to my boat now to go to sleep. I have extra room. You guys are welcome to stay with me." Olivia and Ben probably knew that accepting a random man's invite to go and sleep on their boat probably wasn't the smartest idea, but what choice did they have really? It was well into New Year's Day now. They just wanted to go to sleep. They had each other, and I assumed that the guy looked normal enough, so they say yes. Guy Wallace, the guy driving the water taxi, checks with Olivia and Ben, kind of just saying, "Are you sure? Are you guys good?" And Olivia and Ben say, "Yeah, all good." So Guy drops off Olivia and Ben and the mystery man at the mystery man's boat. What Guy later described to be a 12-meter wooden two-masted kench painted white with a blue stripe and 2 portholes. As Guy Wallace dropped them off, Olivia said Happy New Year to him, and then he drove off. Tragically, that was the last time 17-year-old Olivia Hope and 21-year-old Ben Smart would ever be seen again. The following morning, Olivia's sister wakes up at the Tamarack, and Olivia isn't there, but she really wasn't expecting her to be there because she knew that her and Ben had gone off to find somewhere else to sleep. Naturally, she assumed that Olivia would show up at some point the following morning, but as more and more time passes and Olivia and Ben are nowhere to be found, she does start questioning where they could have gone, but she still assumes and hopes that she's just sleeping off a long night since they were up really, really late. Olivia's sister returns the rented Tamarack, goes back to the shore, and then eventually goes back to their family house. At the same time, Ben's parents over at his house are realizing that Ben never made it home either. Both families begin asking around, talking to people, reaching out to other friends. People who they knew were also at the party, seeing if anyone had any clue where the two of them went off to, but no one does. By January 2nd, both Ben Smart and Olivia Hope are officially reported missing people. The investigation began by gathering more information from witnesses, from people who were also at the party, and searching the surrounding areas for them. But by January 5th, what started off as a missing persons investigation turned into a possible homicide investigation. The investigators named it Operation TAM, short for Tamarack, and they continue talking to possible witnesses while searching all nearby bodies of water. They're not only looking for Olivia and Ben, but they're also looking for any of their belongings, their clothing, anything at all really that would point them toward the right direction. And one of the most important witnesses, if not the most important, was Guy Wallace, the guy who was driving the water taxi who dropped Olivia and Ben off at the mystery man's boat with the mystery man. Realizing that he was likely one of the last people to see Olivia and Ben alive, what he had to say was really important. They find him, they talk to him, and they learn that there were 3 other people on the taxi that night, the couple, and then said mystery man. And when he's talking to authorities, Guy tells them that Olivia and Ben accepted this invite to sleep on this mystery man's boat. He gives them the description of the boat that I told you earlier, and also describes what the man looked like, a 30 to 32-year-old man around 5'9" in height who had long, unkempt, scruffy dark hair with some beard growth. He described him to be quiet. What's the opposite of well-groomed? I don't know. Whatever the opposite of well-groomed is, that. Like a little bit dirty and messy. Very quickly, Detective Inspector Rob Pope turns all of his attention to a man by the name of Scott Watson. 26-year-old Scott Watson. Scott was at the lodge party the night of Ben and Olivia's disappearance, and a lot of people remember him because he was acting quite obnoxious. He was loud, he was belligerent, he was rude. He made rude comments to a lot of people that night, but definitely his comments were more targeted towards women. He was also chirping women because I guess he was trying to be like flirty, but he was being flat out disrespectful, trying to put his hands on them. I'm sure you can kind of picture the type of guy that I'm talking about in your head. Like the kind of guy who just behaves messy. He doesn't sound pleasant to be around. He was also the guy that never wanted the party to end. So that night, after everyone dispersed, kind of going their own way off to bed, Scott kept trying to find people to keep the party going with him. He also had a lengthy criminal record with 48 past convictions on his record, a pretty hefty amount. Understandably so, when Detective Pope learns about this Scott Watson guy, he zeroes in on him and he begins feeling very, very confident that he's on the right track. There are some issues though, so let's talk about those. For starters, the description that Guy Wallace gave of this mystery man and of the mystery man's boat does not match up with Scott and his boat. Guy Wallace, along with the two other people who were on the boat with Olivia and Ben and with a mystery man, described the man to have long, scruffy, unkept hair and a little bit of facial scruff going on, like facial hair. And this picture is from New Year's Eve, and Scott Watson, one, doesn't have long hair, he doesn't have facial hair at all, and he doesn't really look like someone you would describe to be messy and scruffy. Guy Wallace and one other witness described the man's boat to have 2 sails, not 1. Scott's boat had 1. The boat was also described to have been wooden. Scott's boat was metal. The boat was described to be white with blue stripes and to have 2 portholes. Scott's boat did not have portholes and was red and white with no stripes. Also important to point out that although 48 criminal convictions obviously looks incredibly incriminating on paper, all of Scott's convictions were petty crimes like stealing and theft. His most alarming conviction that landed him in jail was for charge, but that charge came from when he got into it with another man at a pub, and they both got in trouble for that. And all of them but one, so 48 out of the 47, were from when Scott was a teenager. He hadn't really been in trouble much since he turned 20. He was 26 years old at the time of the story. Not saying that he's a good guy, not saying that at all, but if you're comparing evidence from witnesses to Scott Watson, none of them match up, and yet according to Detective Pote, that didn't really matter. Scott Watson was taken to the police station for questioning, but during that session, it was obvious that Detective Pote was focusing on him as a suspect and only him. The way that he questioned him was more so like, we know that you did something to him, so you better tell us what happened, instead of, okay, walk me through the events of that night. It was quite aggressive and accusatory in nature. But Scott told authorities that he had been at the party. He told them that he had been up late and that he had attempted to get random strangers to stay up with him to keep the party going. However, his attempts failed, and then he ended up just going to sleep on his boat. 2 witnesses who saw him that night after the party had ended on their boat because he was trying to convince them to stay up with him corroborated his story, saying that they heard him walk towards his boat and didn't really hear him again after that, agreeing that he probably had gone off to bed at that point. But even after all of that, Detective Pope was certain that Scott Watson was their guy, and he ended up bugging his house to listen in on private conversations that Scott was having at home. And after listening to those, Scott's story remained the same. When he talked about the situation at home with family members or friends or whatever, he stuck to the same story. No matter how many times he retold it, it remained the same. And his story was that he had no idea who Olivia and Ben were, and that he had eventually just gone off to bed on his boat by himself. Same thing when his phone was bugged, allegedly wiretapped without any probable cause. Officers reviewed over 70 hours of phone recordings, and in none of them did Scott say anything incriminating. His sister was questioned for hours, like 9 hours I think, and his girlfriend was questioned as well, and both of them stood by Scott's side. Back to the boat, because remember, all of the descriptions of this mystery man's boat were completely different than what Scott's boat looked like, the biggest one being that witnesses claimed that the mystery man's boat had 2 sails when Scott's had 1. So you would think that authorities would be searching for a boat with 2 sails and a blue stripe, but they were not. Instead, according to Detective Pope, Guy Wallace and the other witnesses must have just remembered wrong. And it later came out from a retired police officer who had been involved in the case that officers were instructed to ignore any boat that they saw with 2 sails. Because it didn't matter, because Scott's boat had 1 and Scott was their guy. Guy Wallace wasn't happy about the direction that this investigation was heading to, because he felt like he should have been their most reliable witness, given that he was the one to drop off Olivia and Ben, yet he felt like he was just being ignored. They kept telling him that his memory must have just been incorrect, not caring that Guy was positive on what he saw and what he didn't see. The other witnesses who were also on that water taxi that night were shown a picture of Scott, and they said no, 100,000% that is not the mystery man that we saw that night. And there were even more reports from more people saying that they saw a boat with a blue stripe with 2 sails with an older scruffy looking man driving the boat and 2 young people also on the boat, one of them being a girl, one of them being a boy, and describing the girl to be a young girl with blonde hair. But authorities disregarded it completely. Anything that went against their guy being Scott Watson, it felt like they just did not want to hear. Now let's talk about DNA evidence. Authorities searched his boat, of course. They searched it, and there was nothing that really stood out besides one thing, a blanket, a tiger blanket. The blanket was full of hair, and it was taken in as evidence. Police recovered approximately 400 human hairs from said blanket from Scott's boat. Each one of them was individually looked at, individually tested, and nothing stood out. It sounds like most of it, if not all of it, belonged to Scott or a family member of his. But none that were a match to Olivia, none that were a match to Ben. So they eventually just moved on from that. Later on, Olivia's family home is searched. Strands from her hair from her house are obtained and taken into the laboratory. This is common, right? So they have her DNA in case they need it, so that in itself isn't really weird. However, after that, after authorities had strands of her hair from her family home, they go back and re-examine all of the hairs that they found on Scott's blanket, and somehow, all of a sudden, in the middle of all these little short brown hairs, there are now two strands of long blonde hair. And what do you know? They are an exact match to the hair of Olivia Hope. So a few things with that, because there are a few options. Either the examiner lady did really somehow miss those two long strands of blonde hair the first time around, or they were put there on purpose, or they somehow just got there on accident. As far as them being left there on purpose, from the hair that was recovered from her house, there was not a total count done of how many pieces of hair they had, meaning that it was impossible to know if hair strands were missing and deliberately taken and placed on Scott's boat or on his blanket for someone to find. And as far as them getting there on accident, as absurd as it sounds, the examiner stated that shortly before finding those two hairs on the blanket, she had been examining Olivia's hair that was gathered from her house, and it was in a plastic bag. That plastic bag had a 1 centimeter cut in it, which the examiner could not explain. So the hair could have fallen out through that hole and onto the blanket. Could a hair maybe have gotten stuck on a glove or on somewhere on the examiner's body in the time that she transferred from examining Olivia's actual hair to examining the blanket? I don't know. But other than this alleged hair, there was zero evidence on Scott's boat that connected him to either Olivia or Ben. And yet, although Olivia and Ben's bodies were never found, even though their belongings were never found, even though nothing really apart from those hairs was ever found throughout the course of the investigation, 5 months after Olivia and Ben's disappearance in June of 1998, Scott was arrested and charged with their. And in September of 1999, the jury found Scott Watson guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 17 years before being eligible for parole. Since then, he has maintained his innocence, and he has tried to appeal his sentence over and over again, but he has been denied over and over again. Olivia and Ben's bodies have never been found, and Scott remains behind bars. Yeah, I want to know what you guys think, because I know that I have a lot of people from New Zealand that watch my videos, so I need to know what your opinion on this case is. But yeah, also obviously heartbreaking for Olivia and Ben's family, because they did they get justice? I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts are on this case. Let me know if you've heard about this before. But that is all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
If you're heading to the city this Valentine's Day, here are 3 spooky date ideas for you. For the outdoorsy and braver couples, you can take a ferry to Angel Island and hike trails that overlook the San Francisco Bay. It's beautiful, peaceful, and full of history. But beneath the views is a much darker past. Angel Island was once known as the Ellis Island of the West, but for many immigrants, it was more like a prison. People were held for weeks, months, even years in cramped, inhumane conditions, and some never made it out alive. People say that they never left. Visitors and rangers have reported seeing shadow figures, voices in empty halls, and feelings of being watched. So if your Valentine loves a little bit of hiking, history, and paranormal activity, Angel Island might be the perfect place to fall in love or get followed home by something. Number 2, Stowe Lake in Golden Gate Park. If you're looking to have a Valentine's date that looks like it's straight out of a gothic story, then pack a little picnic and rent a rowboat. Drift across the water, share snacks, watch the reflections of the trees and bridges. It's one of the most romantic places in the city, in my opinion. But when the sun starts to set, the romance takes a little bit of a darker edge. So over 100 years ago, a woman went boating with her baby. Her baby ended up falling overboard. She jumped in to save the baby, and unfortunately, neither of them survived. She is now known as the White Lady of Stowe Lake. Visitors say that they see a woman in a white dress with long, dark, flowing hair wandering along the shoreline late at night. Sometimes they say they just see her standing still at the water's edge. Some people even say that they see her reflection in the water while they're in the rowboat. So if you and your Valentine want a romantic picnic on the water with the chance of a ghostly encounter, Stowe Lake might be the perfect place. Number 3, we have the Queen Anne Hotel, for those of you who want to have a spooky night in. By day, the Queen Anne has a very elegant Victorian charm. Beautiful staircases, antique furniture, and cozy little reading nooks. But once the lights dim and nighttime sets in, the air changes. Room 410 has a reputation few rooms can rival. Guests report strange sensations, disembodied footsteps, and the unmistakable feeling of another presence in the room. Others say that they hear soft whispers just before they fall asleep, almost like someone's trying to share a secret with them. Some people say that they wake up with cold sensations or the feeling that someone is sitting at the edge of the bed. A cozy night in room 410 where every creak and shadow kind of becomes part of the experience. Let me know in the comments if you guys want more spooky date ideas.
This man was gunned down in broad daylight in front of an entire town, and nobody saw a thing. Ken Rex McElroy was born in 1934. He lived in Skidmore, Missouri, and he was an awful human. He dropped out of school in 8th grade, and while he started off just doing petty theft kind of things, this quickly turned into something way more sinister. He was eventually charged with theft 21 different times, but each time he was able to get out of these charges by intimidating witnesses mostly. He also had a bulldog of a lawyer who would get him out of trouble all the time, but everyone knew that he had done it. But things would only get worse when he would essay a 12-year-old girl, and when he was facing charges for this, he convinced her parents to let him marry her. So he divorced his wife and then married her to get away from these charges. She would run away from him, and he went back to her parents' house, burnt their house down, and killed their dog, and the parents eventually were like, just go back. And he was not nice to her either, because why would he be? He's a terrible human. In July of 1976, Ken would shoot a farmer in the stomach over some kind of disagreement. He was charged with assault with intent to kill, but Ken would find 2 people to testify for him that they were out hunting miles away from this area and that he was not with a farmer at the time. There was no possible way that he could have been with a farmer. He was let go, even though he did it. He was completely guilty of this. But then in 1980, one of Ken's children went into the local grocery store, and the shop owner accused this child of stealing candy. This angered Ken, and he shot him in the neck. He shot the grocer in the neck. Ken would once again be charged with assault, and surprisingly, he was convicted. But then Ken and his lawyer decided to appeal, and he was let out of jail while the appeal was going on. But this is when he started threatening the man who owned the store. He, in broad daylight, went up to the store owner and he held a gun to him and he threatened his life if he didn't drop the charges. At this point, people in town were so fed up with him because it wasn't just that he was openly assaulting people and shooting people and he was just an awful person, but he kept getting away with it and they didn't know what to do. So they finally decided to have a town meeting. On July 10th of 1981, the townspeople got together to decide what they were going to do. They also invited the sheriff to come with them. The sheriff did encourage the people of Skidmore, Missouri, to just leave him alone. But as soon as he left town, they decided to walk down to the local bar where Ken was having a drink. They all crowded into the bar and then waited until Ken left. Then they followed him back out and several shots rang out. He was shot twice and nobody called the ambulance. They just let him die. Several investigators did come try to investigate, but no one saw anything. Not a single person knew what exactly had happened that day, even though they were basically all there to witness. So here's my question. Do you blame him? I personally don't, but what are your thoughts on it? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more.
Her tiny body lay there in a field with her throat cut. Then her fingers started to move. It was summer 1990 in beautiful Dickinson, Texas. A group of children were out in a field just playing, as kids do, when all of a sudden they were stopped in their tracks. This child stumbled and kind of stubbed her toe a little bit and was like, ow, she was a little bit irritated. And then she saw what she'd bumped into. It was the body of an 8-year-old little girl. Now rewind to the night before. Little Jennifer Schuett was living in the area and she was an absolute ray of sunshine. Super energetic, really friendly and just totally full of life. But on the evening of the 9th of August, she was cuddled up in bed with her mum, but she was a real fidget and she wouldn't stop kind of tossing and turning. Her mum was like, can you please get into your own bed? You're actually keeping me up and I've got to be at work early tomorrow. So Jennifer scrambled into her own bedroom, not realizing a terrifying predator was waiting to pounce. Later that evening, a shadowy figure crept into her ground floor bedroom. One minute Jennifer was asleep, and the next thing she knew, she was being carried by a stranger into a car. As she realized she wasn't in a nightmare, this was actually really happening, she tried to scream. But the man was running by this point and held his sweaty hand over her face, almost smothering her. He then shoved her into a vehicle, but this part actually really confused her because he then tried to almost like reassure her and say that he was an undercover police officer. He was like, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. But she was a clever young girl and she was like, why the hell would a police officer take me from my room in the middle of the night and kidnap me? She really wanted to believe him because honestly, coming to terms with the truth was too terrifying to bear. As they pulled up down a gravel road, she suddenly realized things were about to get a whole lot worse when he pulled out a knife and taunted her, "Am I scaring you, little girl?" Before she could answer, he grabbed her round the throat and started to choke her, and then everything just went black. She realized she wasn't dead when she woke being dragged along the gravel by her ankles. She then heard a car door slam and realized she'd been abandoned in a field to die. So she started to scream at the top of her lungs, but why wasn't any sound coming out? She put both of her hands to her throat and felt this warm gushing. Her hands were soaked in blood. She'd had her throat slit. All she could do was lie there and just pray to be found. Pray that somebody was going to stumble upon her. She was floating in and out of consciousness. She couldn't even make out what kind of time it was. Soon she saw light coming through the trees and she realized it was the next morning and she couldn't believe she wasn't dead yet. Frustratingly, she kept seeing cars drive past in the distance, but nobody stopped and she couldn't scream. Meanwhile, a frantic call came into police. Jennifer's mum had woken up for work, checked on Jennifer in her bedroom and found her window wide open. Police raced over and started scouring the area, begging volunteers to help look for this child. Until the entire day had almost been and gone and there was no sign of her. But some kids were playing in the field and my first instinct was like, if you're a parent and you hear that a child has gone missing, you surely wouldn't let your kids out to play in the field. But obviously it was a good job that they did because they actually stumbled upon Jennifer's body. Then Jennifer started to move. She was silently begging, trying to kind of hint, "I'm still alive, please rescue me." Just a side note, I don't know how horrifically that must have severely impacted those children. Thankfully, Jennifer was helicoptered to hospital. Doctors warned her family that she actually may not ever be able to speak again, but she defied all odds. She'd been kidnapped, had her throat cut from ear to ear, been SA'd by a paedophile, and just been left to die out on her own. That she was alive. Now, her clothes were actually found abandoned in a ditch, which was great news because police could collect those for DNA evidence. Jennifer gave police every detail she possibly could about this man. She gave a very good description of what he looked like, and she said that he told her his name was Dennis. Now, obviously he did this thinking, I'm just going to kill her anyway, so she can't actually tell this to the police. But it would take nearly 2 decades before any news. Finally, thanks to advances in DNA technology, Dennis Bradford was arrested in Arkansas. Infuriatingly though, while awaiting his trial in 2010, he took the easy way out. Jennifer never got to see her case through to the end and never got justice. But I guess we can all breathe somewhat of a sigh of relief knowing that Dennis is no longer on this planet with us.